Are EV drivers and YouTuber EV drivers risk takers? Or are they just rich? This is something that I'd like to talk about in this video. So for the past 18 months, I've been YouTubing about EVs, about zero tailpipe emission cars, mainly the IONIQ electric that I used to own before I had to give it up when I left the UK and moved to Denmark. The videos currently have a flavour of, do I need to recreate all elements of the lifestyle I used to have in the UK, including owning an electric car, or are there other ways of doing things, particularly because I'm now here in Denmark? All that time, I've seen YouTube as a kind of platform for open consultation. I basically say, I'm thinking about doing this, I'm thinking about doing that, what do you think? And in the comments, people like you share their opinions and it helps me to make the decisions that I need to make. I do also find challenging comments a learning opportunity to delve a bit below the surface at some of the things that might not be obvious, even when the comments sound a bit like this. Now, I'm going to embellish this, and no offense intended to the original commenters.
Dear YouTuber Zero Tailpipe Esquire, my fine fellow, I'd like to share, I think you may well agree, not unreasonably frustrated remarks regarding your simply frightful degree of unpreparedness for your recent escapade to relocate your good self from the glorious shores of our Grand Britannia to the admittedly unconscionable frigidity and remote fastnesses of Denmark. I simply struggle to conceive that you did not avail yourself of even the most rudimentary of researches for yourself and your dearest ones before your actual embarkation. Sincerely, A. Anonymous, Brigadier General, Mrs. P.S. Kindly cease your waffling indecision. Be aware your moving pictures of late are not immune to arousing in me a potentially irretrievable state of boredom.
Okay, that probably went a little bit over the top, but the points there, I think, are about risk levels and levels of wealth. So I'm going to talk about it in this video. Calming down from being a little bit silly, viewers are watching the channel and thinking this person is not moving fast enough. They're not taking as much risk as they would like me to, as an EV YouTuber, and they perhaps assume that I've got resources that I don't have to make decisions quickly and without research. So projecting onto me personality traits or characteristics either from yourself or from other EV YouTubers, and that's fine, but it's interesting to think about what kind of levels of risk are we talking about here. And it makes me reflect about what levels of risk have I taken in the past and what resources do I have to draw upon. It's easy to take risks if you have a lot of capital behind you, if you have a lot of resources. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you have expectations about YouTubers around, the levels of risk they seem to take and often the kind of silentness about their kind of riches or their resources that are helping them to do that? So when I get comments about that, like, coming from the UK to Denmark and maybe I should have researched it more, and other people commenting, just speed up, make some decisions faster, take more risks. One is pointing out that I took too many risks, and another one is pointing out I took too few risks, which seems contradictory, but it makes me think about, and particularly this is connected to why I even got into EVs in the first place, what kind of attitudes to risk do I actually have? And then we'll get to the richest thing in a minute, which I think is a bit of a kind of damper on the risk-taking behaviour. Let's just go back about sort of 20, 25 years and a little bit about me. 25 years ago, I think it was, I jumped out of an aeroplane at 10,000 feet. And I remember talking to colleagues at work, I was in my early 20s at the time, they were in their kind of mid-40s, saying, why don't they come along and do it too? And then after we'd done it, trying to encourage them to give it a try too, because it was one heck of an experience. And their reasoning was around, they were too old, they had families, they couldn't risk dying, so they weren't going to do it. Sudden bit of high risk in an otherwise kind of fairly low risk landscape. Then a little bit later, I kind of packed everything up, moved from London to Manchester, and completely changed my career. In between those things, I walked 900 miles solo for charity from John O'Groats, which is the northeastern tip of mainland UK, to Land's End, which is the southwestern mainland tip of the UK. Some EV drivers have driven that, but I've walked it, and it took 2 months. Again, a fairly high risk thing in between a kind of landscape of fairly low risk things. Then there's another sort of quiet period, and then a sort of blip of risk-taking again around late 2014 when I decided to lease a Nissan Leaf, 24 kilowatt hour, that didn't have enough range for me to do my commute. I didn't have enough range in it to get to work and back because there was a gradient involved and motorways, high speeds and gradients. This Nissan Leaf literally couldn't get me to work and back, meaning I had to charge at work and had to rely on workplace charging. And it became harder and harder, and I had to leave earlier and earlier in the morning to get to the few charging posts that were working because other people were taking up driving electric cars. Then in 2018, I left my job. quite soon after I got the IONIQ electric. I didn't talk about it on the channel, and it was terrifying, and again, a fairly high-risk thing to do, because even though I had some work, I didn't walk straight into another full-time job, until then taking another enormous risk of deciding, okay, let's move me and my entire family to a country where I don't speak the language, in the hopes of a long-term payoff of a kind of better life. So, you can add those up there. Skydive, moving and completely changing my career, leasing an electric car, fairly new technology even at the time, quitting my job, moving the whole family to Denmark. These are fairly risky behaviors. I mean, other people might do them, but I guess it's not the norm. And this actually brings us something that YouTubers on EVs and other kind of things talk about quite a lot, which is early adopters. Now, early adopters is something that I came across in the work of Everett Rogers, so Rogers' model of diffusion, the diffusion of innovation. So you've probably seen some of these terms. I'm going to put the graph now on the screen. This is a way of splitting up the segments of people, different types of people, on the basis of a standard deviation, but distance from the average time to adopt any particular technologies. For electric cars, it might be one kind of time period. For other things like TVs, mobile phones, it might be much shorter, into segments as to the sequence in which these people actually adopt this particular innovation. So I wouldn't position myself as an innovator. I think with electric cars, certainly in the modern era of electric cars, that's things around, the GM1, the Tesla Roadster, and then niche kind of bespoke EVs that might have been around at the time. I think with an IONIQ electric, it's probably early adopters. Now, these early adopters have a kind of communication and signaling role, which is why so many of them are YouTubers, I think. And then they're talking to probably other early adopters and the early majority. Then there's the kind of late majority that have some kind of peer pressure and adopt later on. And then there's the laggards, who are basically the people who try and fight it, who try and hold on to the status quo and actively kind of suppress. This is kind of an indication or a measure of risk taking. If you're kind of more to the left, you're earlier on, you're probably more of a risk taker. These kind of diffusion plots, by the way, result in S-shaped diffusion curves that you can draw for all sorts of different technologies and products. Maybe I am a certain kind of risk taker, being an early adopter, and I'm telling people about the nature of these risks. I'm communicating to the early majority. Then I do wonder how many other EV drivers and how many other EV YouTubers would think of themselves in this way, as kind of risk-taking early adopters. So let's follow through on this for the sake of argument and look at the way I would think about the risk being connected to the amount of resources or money that I've got. I'm thinking about my monthly income, my monthly net income, what I would be comfortable with and what I wouldn't. At the top here, we've got my kind of day-to-day disposable income of, say, buying food at work at a subsidized canteen that I'm completely not worried about here. Then there's a block that might be larger or smaller, depending on your own personal situation, where there's things that, okay, I'm fairly comfortable about doing these kind of things. This would include for me one of the kind of swap fits bicycles, where I'm just renting a bicycle with a fairly cheap monthly fee, 20 to 30 pounds, on a rolling 1 month contract that I can cancel anytime. My mobile phone contract is the same thing. It's perhaps a bit more than I'm comfortable with, but I know that I can cancel it on a 1 month basis and it's not going to completely weigh me down. But nothing much more significant than a kind of, a rental bicycle or a Netflix subscription or, something like that. And then we get into a more uncertain region where we're looking at things like the 1 month mini lease of the Renault Zoe. We're at kind of, £500 sterling. It's getting into the point where it's not trivial. As I said in the previous video, it's the price of a large piece of furniture. It's the price of a sofa, replacing one of my musical instruments with a decent quality one. It's not something to sort of be so quick to jump and do, where you're putting down a lot of money. Also in this area is kind of anything beyond what I would still put in the yellow, I guess, which would be a lease on a decent electric bike. Something that is more expensive than the low or no commitment kind of, unpowered bicycle monthly agreement. So something like, I've been looking at this Swiss branded Specialized bikes. They're quite expensive, probably about £3,000 sterling. They look great, but that's not a trivial amount of money. So that would be yellow if I could get it on some kind of monthly deal, or it would be in the orange if it's an upfront purchase. Debt, short-term debt that I can pay off, but putting me in debt, would be things like the biohybrid that I've talked about in a previous video. And it would also be kind of, getting into leasing or loans to buy an electric car again. Kind of Tesla Model 3 monthly payments, perhaps, or Kia e-Soul or Kia e-Niro, that kind of thing. So that's putting me in the red, which I would think of as kind of, debts that I can take on, which I'm very not happy about, but I know that I can pay off. Then we get to the kind of black region, which is, when people say, oh, go out and just get a Tesla Model S. No, I can't do that. That's too expensive, and that's in a region that even if I manage to get the debt finance, I possibly couldn't pay it off, or it's going to cause serious limitations on my lifestyle or problems for my family, and I'm not going to do that. And I think that's getting into kind of like house buying, mortgage kind of territory where, that can go well, but look at the subprime sort of global financial crash and so on. That can go really wrong. You can think you can afford that, and then circumstances change and things go really wrong. Going on this scale then from the kind of light, loose, disposable things, for day-to-day things, low or no commitment rentals and things, then getting into kind of longer term finance, getting less comfortable about, down into getting the more and more expensive electric cars through whatever kind of finance, upfront purchase, leasing, loans and that, down to the kind of things that would essentially crush me, and I'm not prepared to take those kind of risks. There might be other YouTubers for whom my kind of things of buying, say, a Tesla Model S, they're way up in the green, I would say, or the yellow. I mean, it's still too expensive to be in the kind of blue of the day-to-day of kind of price of meals and snacks and things. But I don't know. Most people on YouTube don't talk about their income, don't talk about their disposable income. They don't disclose their own kind of personal situation. And I'm not necessarily asking them to do, but this is the kind of thing when I look at EV YouTubers, I'm thinking about that. I'm not sure if they're willing to take more risks than me, but certainly they have a greater kind of safety buffer. They have more resources. They can take what look like comparatively large risks to me, but to you, a viewer, might not seem like any risk at all because you see other EV YouTubers just doing it on a daily basis. That kind of makes clear why some people think that I've been too risky in moving to Denmark, and other people think that I'm not being risky enough in quickly jumping into some kind of large purchase here in Denmark to kind of recreate the conditions of my zero tailpipe emissions lifestyle in the UK. What level of risk is right will vary from person to person, and what I can do won't always make everybody happy on YouTube. But now let's get to my usual kind of weekly update about what I have been doing. First, I have confirmed that I'm eligible for the 6th E.ON mini lease of a Renault Zoe 41 kilowatt hour. There were some questions about whether I had to be a Danish citizen, Statsborger. But no, that's okay as long as I have the various bits of ID. And I've been trying to look at a few different e-bike options. There seem to be quite a few brands in Netherlands and Germany that people have recommended in the comments to previous videos that look like great bikes, cheaper than ones I could get domestically here in Denmark. And I've also been, again, just amused by the way that cycling happens here in Aarhus, Denmark. For instance, the other day I saw a queue of cyclists, and as a Brit, I thought, oh, wonderful, a queue, where do I join? Really neatly lined up at a red traffic light along the cycle path on the right-hand side of it, which, yeah, genius. I thought, in the UK, people would be a bit, even with our tradition of queuing, it would be a bit chaotic and messy. And also, it rained quite a lot this week, even though it is summer here in Denmark. It's very much like the UK and very much like the Highlands of Scotland. Actually, the weather reminds me a lot. And that's made me think about, actually, the whole car versus bike versus walking versus other transport options. It's difficult to project forward and think what it's going to be like when it's dark and the days are short and it's cold and the roads and things are slippery. I don't think it's going to hold me back from a more straightforward e-bike purchase in the short term. Maybe it was one of the last things I'll have to do on my rental bike before I hand it back at the end of August is to just go out and get drenched in the rain and see how I like that or not. And just get a sense of what it's actually like to cycle when it's not sort of pseudo-Californian weather here, as it has been for most of the time in the 2 months since I arrived. Yeah, so things going on, and I'm looking into things, and I keep spotting Tesla Model 3s everywhere, which is kind of like, I really want them, but anyway, I keep spotting them, and there'll be more to come on the channel. So yeah, please do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me, and thanks for watching, and bye for now. And I'll play out here with this kind of silly thing that I did where I was just thinking about the quantity of IKEA furniture that I've put together. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be strange if someone made a kind of trophy necklace out of all the little Allen keys that you get free with each IKEA item often to kind of assemble it yourself. And yeah, it's looking crazy already. So yeah, so there's that.